Sometimes life surprises us with a bond so pure, so unexpected, it changes everything. Max was a stray dog, roaming the streets, invisible to the world. No one stopped to notice him. No one offered him kindness. For Max, every day was a fight for survival, a silent struggle against hunger, loneliness, and fear. He didn't know what it felt like to belong. On the other side of this story was Sarah. She had always been a warm, loving person, but life had dealt her a heavy blow. Losing someone she deeply loved had left her heartbroken and adrift. She withdrew from the world, convinced she would never feel whole again. Her days blended into each other, filled with quiet sadness and unanswered questions. But as fate would have it, their paths were about to cross. Two lives, so different, yet both yearning for something neither could put into words, were on a collision course. This is a story of how a chance encounter changed not just their lives, but also the meaning of love, resilience, and healing. A story of an unbreakable bond that proves hope can be found in the most unexpected places. Max's life was one of constant struggle. Born on the streets, he had never known the comfort of a warm bed or the joy of a loving touch. Each day was a test of survival, digging through trash for scraps of food, finding shelter from the rain under old cardboard boxes, and dodging people who saw him as nothing more than a nuisance. His once bright eyes had grown weary, dulled by the harsh reality of a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Sarah, meanwhile, was living in a world of her own pain. She had always been a dreamer, an artist who saw beauty in everything around her. But after losing her fiancé in an unexpected tragedy, the colors of her world faded. Her paintbrushes sat untouched, her once vivid canvases gathering dust in the corner of her small apartment. Grief consumed her, leaving her isolated and unsure if she could ever find joy again. For weeks, Sarah wandered aimlessly through her days, searching for something to fill the emptiness inside her. Little did she know, her life was about to change forever. She wasn't looking for Max, and Max certainly wasn't expecting her. But fate often has a way of bringing together the ones who need each other the most. Their meeting wasn't grand or dramatic. It was simple, even unremarkable at first glance. But in that moment, when Sarah first locked eyes with Max, something shifted. A connection sparked, unspoken yet undeniable, and it marked the beginning of a journey neither of them could have imagined. It was an ordinary day when Sarah decided to take a walk through the park. The weight of her grief pressed heavily on her, but the quietness of the park offered a brief escape from her thoughts. As she sat on a weathered bench, staring blankly at the ground, she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. A scruffy dog, thin and hesitant, was slowly making his way toward her. At first, Sarah thought he would keep his distance, but the dog stopped just a few feet away, his eyes fixed on her. There was something in his gaze, something soft yet cautious, as though he was searching for a sign that it was safe to come closer. Sarah instinctively reached into her bag and pulled out half of the sandwich she hadn't touched. She held it out, her hand trembling slightly. The dog hesitated, his nose twitching as he caught the scent of food. Then, slowly, he inched forward, his movements careful and deliberate, until he was close enough to take the sandwich from her hand. Sarah watched as he devoured it in seconds, his hunger painfully obvious. She couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Sarah felt something stir inside her, a flicker of warmth she hadn't felt in months. Without thinking, she softly said, "Hey there, buddy. Are you all alone too?" The dog's tail wagged ever so slightly, and that small gesture was enough to make up Sarah's mind. She stood up, her heart racing, and said, "Come on, let's get you out of here." She didn't know why she was doing this or what it would mean, but she knew one thing for sure. Neither of them needed to be alone anymore. Max's first day in Sarah's home was a mix of curiosity and hesitation. He cautiously sniffed every corner, his tail wagging nervously as he tried to make sense of this unfamiliar space. Sarah watched him with a small smile, her heart unexpectedly lightened by his presence. She set down a bowl of food and water, and as Max eagerly devoured his meal, she realized just how much he had been through. In the days that followed, Max slowly began to settle in. At first, he was skittish, flinching at sudden movements or loud noises. But Sarah was patient, speaking to him in soft tones and offering him gentle reassurances. Gradually, Max's defenses began to lower. He started following her from room to room, his eyes filled with quiet curiosity. One morning, Sarah was painting in her studio when Max wandered in. He stared at her with his head tilted, as though trying to understand what she was doing. Amused, Sarah dipped her finger in a swirl of blue paint and gently touched it to Max's nose. He sneezed in surprise, then wagged his tail furiously, making Sarah laugh for the first time in months. Over time, Sarah noticed changes in herself too. The heavy weight of grief she had been carrying started to lift, little by little. Max's playful antics and unconditional love brought color back into her days, literally and figuratively. She found herself painting again, inspired by the bond they were building. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt hopeful. Sarah and Max's bond grew stronger with each passing day. Max transformed from a timid stray into a confident, joyful companion. In return, Sarah found comfort and purpose in caring for him. They had both been lost, but together they had found a way to heal and start anew. Max had been thriving in his new life with Sarah. Every day was a new adventure, walks in the park, cozy nights on the couch, and moments of pure joy that neither of them had felt in a long time. But one quiet afternoon, everything changed. Sarah had been in the kitchen when she heard a soft thud from the living room. Rushing in, she found Max lying on his side, breathing heavily. Panic surged through her as she knelt beside him, gently calling his name. Max opened his eyes weakly, but something wasn't right. Without hesitation, Sarah scooped him up and rushed him to the vet. At the clinic, the vet's expression was serious. After running several tests, she sat Sarah down and explained that Max had a critical heart condition, a condition likely developed from years of malnutrition and stress during his time on the streets. Sarah listened, her chest tightening as the vet explained that Max's time might be limited. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she stroked Max's fur later that evening. She couldn't imagine losing him, not after everything they had been through together. But as she looked into his eyes, still filled with trust and love despite his exhaustion, she made a promise to herself and to him. Sarah decided she wouldn't focus on how much time they had left. Instead, she would make every single moment count. She sat down with a notebook and began writing a list, a bucket list for Max. She filled it with things she imagined he had never experienced, feeling the sand beneath his paws at the beach, chasing butterflies in a meadow, enjoying a feast of all his favorite treats. As Sarah looked at the list, a determination grew within her. Max had given her so much: his love, his companionship, his ability to help her heal. Now it was her turn to give back to him in every way she could. With Max's bucket list in hand, Sarah was determined to make every moment they had together unforgettable. Their first stop was the beach. Max had never seen the ocean before, and as soon as they arrived, his ears perked up at the sound of the waves. Sarah smiled through her tears as Max hesitated for only a moment before running toward the water. The joy on his face as he splashed and chased the foam was something she would never forget. Next, they visited a sprawling meadow filled with wildflowers. Max's tail wagged non-stop as he bounded after butterflies, his energy and excitement making Sarah laugh for the first time in days. She lay in the grass watching him, capturing every moment in her heart like a photograph. It was as if Max had forgotten his pain, and for a little while, so had she. One evening, Sarah set up a small camping trip in their backyard. Under a sky full of stars, she wrapped Max in a cozy blanket and shared stories with him as if he could understand every word. She cooked him a special meal, filled with all his favorite foods, and watched as he happily devoured it, his tail wagging with every bite. But as the days passed, Max began to grow weaker. His once bounding steps slowed, and his energy waned. Sarah knew the end was drawing closer, but she refused to let sadness take over. She stayed by his side, comforting him and cherishing every moment they still had together. On a quiet morning, with sunlight streaming through the windows, Max lay beside Sarah, his head resting in her lap. She stroked his fur, whispering softly to him, telling him how much he meant to her and how grateful she was for everything he had given her. In his final moments, Max looked up at her with those same trusting eyes that had changed her life the day they met. As Max took his last breath, Sarah held him close, tears streaming down her face. Her heart was breaking, but she felt a deep sense of peace knowing that Max had been loved deeply and completely in his final days. He hadn't just been a stray dog, he had been her companion, her healer, her family. And now he would forever be a part of her story. After Max's passing, Sarah was left with a void, but also with a deep, unshakable sense of gratitude. She spent the days following his death reflecting on all the moments they had shared, all the joy he brought into her life. Max had given her so much more than she could ever have imagined. He had healed parts of her that she thought were beyond repair. But Sarah knew she couldn't let Max's story end with sadness. His love and his spirit had changed her, and she wanted to honor him in a way that would carry his legacy forward. One day, while sitting at her desk, Sarah decided to visit the animal shelter in town. She wasn't sure if she was ready for another dog, but she knew one thing. There were so many others like Max, waiting for their chance at a better life. When she arrived at the shelter, her heart felt heavy, but also hopeful. She wandered through the rows of cages, each one filled with dogs who seemed to be longing for the same thing Max had wanted: love and a family. As she walked by, one particular dog caught her eye, a small, timid dog who reminded her so much of Max when they first met. She knelt down and offered a smile, feeling that same spark she had felt when she first saw Max. It was as if he was there with her, urging her to open her heart once more. With a deep breath, Sarah made the decision. She was going to give this dog a chance, just like she had given Max. As she signed the adoption papers, Sarah felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. It was as if she could hear Max's voice in her heart, telling her that it was okay to love again. She knew that she would never forget him, that his memory would always live on in her heart. But this new journey, with this new dog, would be a tribute to the love Max had given her, a love that would never truly fade. And so, Sarah began a new chapter. She walked out of the shelter with her new companion, knowing that Max's spirit would always be by her side, guiding her as she continued to rescue and love the animals who needed her most. As Sarah walked out of the shelter with her new companion by her side, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. Max's story had come full circle, and in a way, so had hers. His love had healed her heart, and now she was ready to offer that same love to another animal in need. "Max, this is for you," Sarah whispered, as her new dog wagged its tail beside her. The bond she had shared with Max would never be replaced, but she understood now that love was infinite. It could be shared, it could grow, and it could make the world a better place, one paw at a time. She began to share Max's story with others, hoping to inspire them to adopt, to open their hearts, and to rescue animals in need. She spoke of Max's transformation from a scared, lonely dog to a happy, loved companion, and how that same love had saved her in ways she couldn't have imagined. If you've ever thought about rescuing a dog or any animal, please consider it, Sarah said in a heartfelt message to her viewers. You might just end up saving each other, just like I did with Max. He taught me that love has no limits, and there's always room for one more. As the video came to an end, Sarah smiled softly, glancing down at her new friend. Max's memory would always live on, and in his honor, Sarah would continue to help animals, give them the love they deserved, and ensure that Max's story would inspire others to open their hearts. Thank you for watching. Sarah said, her voice filled with gratitude. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have a story of your own about a pet who changed your life, share it in the comments. Let's keep spreading love, one paw at a time. The screen fades to black, and the words, "Dedicated to all the Maxes out there," appear on the screen. The video ends with a soft, hopeful tune as the outro rolls.